So welcome to More Than Apps, Affordable Program Delivery Through Mobile Phones. This is Lindsey Bealko. I'm the webinar facilitator and trainer from Idealware. I'm going to be walking you through today's session. Got a few other people that are joining us today that are going to help with their own experience or contributing their experience delivering programs through apps or mobile websites or text message programs. So those people are Pat Malone from the Immigration Advocates Organization and Xander Karsten from Pro Bono Net. So look forward to having both Pat and Xander share their experience as we go along the way. And we're glad that you are here. So again, I'm Lindsey Bealko. I'm an expert trainer with Idealware. I'm also the principal and founder of Toolkit Consulting, which is my day job, I guess you would say, where I help social good organizations use technology and communications to have more impact and more social good in the world. So really glad to be with you today. And again, I'll just say one more time so Brian and Xander and Pat know, at any point, feel free to clear your throat to interrupt me and chime in if you have experience or a comment that you want to share. You guys all bring different experience to this, and so would welcome your contributions as we go. We've got a lot to cover, so I will be talking a little bit fast to make sure that we get to the discussion and the good stuff and give you a chance to share your experience. But at any point, if you're ready to chime in, feel free to interrupt me. So 4 basic things we're looking to cover today about mobile service delivery. One is kind of just to give an overview of the mobile world. I think everybody, all of us on the call probably know that mobile is big right now and it matters. But we'll just take a quick background look at some stats that help us size up just how important of an opportunity the mobile world is, and not just for kind of like the privileged world, but also for people that are living at or below the poverty level, low-income families, all different demographics are really using mobile in a heavy way. So it's an important opportunity if you're not already thinking about your mobile strategy and how you can use mobile to help you deliver programs. The opportunity is definitely here. And then we're going to basically look at 3 main ways that you can use mobile for service delivery, and those are these 3 bullets here. So 1, using it to provide information about your organization or your services, information that will be valuable to your clients or your supporters. And when I say supporters, that could be lawyers that are doing pro bono work for you, it could be volunteers, it could be donors or other grant makers or supporters, and of course your clients are the people you're trying to reach. So we'll look at using mobile to provide them with valuable information, using mobile to engage them in conversations, including 2-way conversations, and also looking at how you can use mobile to support staff in the field, whether that's about creating case notes or capturing information or collecting data from your clients or constituents. So let's go ahead and dive in. So what is this new mobile world that we're talking about? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these stats because I think we all probably have a pretty good sense that, as I was saying before, mobile is here and it's big. You know, we're pretty well saturated, particularly in the U.S., with mobile phones or cell phones. So as you can see here, 90% of American adults have a cell phone. And again, this includes people that are living in low-income households. So 84% of households that are below the $30,000 household income level have cell phones as well. As you can see, the saturation is less for smartphones, but the gap between low-income households and all households is not that great. And these are pretty recent stats from the Pew Internet study from January of 2014. And as I mentioned, the mobile usage is really common across all different demographics, whether that's race or ethnicity, different age groups, and different income levels. So, you know, you do see some difference between the use between white or non-Hispanic, people that identify as white or non-Hispanic race or ethnicity, and Black, non-Hispanic, or Hispanic. Same thing with income levels, but they're not huge gaps. So really we're just seeing a lot, people across all different demographic levels, all different race and ethnicities, different ages and different income levels are really using phones. And they're not just using them, as you all well know, they're not just using them to make phone calls. 81% are sending and receiving text messages. 60% are using them to access the internet. These are a little bit old. These are from 2013, so these numbers have definitely gone up, and people are definitely using them to send and receive email and download and use apps. And I think these top 4 are the 4 that we're really going to focus on today, because that's where there's a great opportunity for legal services organizations or legal aid organizations to reach their clients or supporters with some program delivery. So we're going to start by looking at how you can provide information via mobile. So there are a few things that we want to look at here. The first thing I want to say is that start with the basics. So we've got some throwback cell phone photos here that maybe are more accurate for if we're looking at all different demographics and income levels. Maybe there are some older smartphones that are still in the works. But start with the basics. So if you haven't yet looked at your website on a mobile phone or figured out how to optimize your website for viewing on a mobile phone, that's a great place to start. So, and actually even before that, if you're feeling like your website that when it's viewed on a traditional desktop computer or a laptop computer is out of order, when you're thinking about mobile, if you feel like your desktop website or your regular website is out of order, start there. So do you have the basics in place whether we're talking about mobile or not? Or is your website hugely out of date? Is nobody using it? Does it not have the right information on it? Start with your website. Is it up to date? Do you have an email marketing strategy that's driving people to the content on your website? So are you collecting email addresses? Are you sending e-newsletters? Do you have a decent client relationship management system to help you track those email addresses and people's contact preferences? So, even before you get into the world of what your mobile strategy is going to be, make sure that you've got those basics in place. You've got a good website, it's up to date, you're happy with it. You know how to drive people to that website. You've got people's email addresses and email marketing strategy, which for many of us is an e-newsletter, and you've actually got a database that helps you keep track of this data. Because as soon as you start thinking about mobile, if those things are kind of out of whack or not in good shape, you're just going to be amplifying that. You're going to be driving more people to that out-of-date website that's not going to be optimized for mobile. And you're going to be collecting people's cell phone numbers as a way of potentially communicating with them through text message. And if your client relationship management or CRM tool is not in order, then you're going to have one more set of data that you're trying to collect and keep track of, and it's not going to be all together the way you want it to be. So first start there, and then you can start with what we see on this slide, which is thinking about a mobile website. As you saw from the previous slides, most people are actually looking at our websites from their phones now. They're not usually looking at your website on a desktop, or they're using a number of different devices, and they're looking at your website across devices. So you just want to make sure that wherever they're finding you, whether it's on their tiny little phone screen or their tablet screen or a laptop or a desktop screen, that they can find what they want and that your site looks good. So a nice takeaway, I think a lot of you are probably already offering a good deal of your content through mobile, but if you're not yet, it's good to just take a look at your website on a phone and see how it looks. The other thing that can be really interesting when you're starting off with your mobile strategy is to look at your website analytics, whether that's Google Analytics or otherwise, and get a sense for how much of your current website traffic is coming from mobile. So how many people, maybe you don't believe it or you just want some stats to help make a case to your executive director or otherwise. So looking at your website analytics to see how much of your traffic is coming from the phone, and then also whether it's from web or from traditional internet connection or from mobile, looking at what are the pages on your site that most people are going to or that people are staying on the longest, because that's going to give you some clues as to which pages you may want to update and optimize for viewing on a mobile phone. Now, I'm having a hard time tracking the chat at the same time as.
So one of the things that I put in there is that legal aid organizations typically do not have constituent management systems the way that other nonprofits do. A lot of them don't accept or do very little fundraising or outreach in that manner. They have a case management system, but it doesn't really have that email integration or that push type marketing that you see in other nonprofits. So that whole idea of having a constituent management system that people can opt into through your website, and then you target them with specific content as it comes out, almost doesn't exist in legal services. It's a very good point, and it's something that we should look at promoting more in this particular realm.
Okay, great. That's really good background. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm also just seeing the chat message from Xander, which is really interesting, which is that across all the LawHelp sites, about 40% of the users are accessing content on mobile. So that's kind of a really interesting and important stat, just in terms of how many people are already taking advantage of the content that some of the organizations are making available to them through mobile. Well, whether you're optimizing it to them through mobile or not, they're looking at your sites through mobile. So that's really interesting. Thanks, you guys. Okay, so taking a look at your site on a mobile phone is a great place to start. And then, when you think about optimizing your website for a mobile phone, plan that people can only see the top left of your website or a full but tiny site. So if you haven't already looked into using mobile templates or responsive design or something that would make your website align better to a mobile platform, what you might find when you look at it on a mobile device or on your phone is that everybody sees everything really tiny, or they see the top left of your site, or if you pick a different approach, there are mobile templates, or there are responsive design templates you can use from content management systems that will actually let you just have the first thing your mobile users see be a very simple menu of the most important content that you think they're going to want to access. And we'll look at a couple of examples of that later on the slide, or later in the presentation. The interesting question to ask yourself when you're thinking about optimizing your website for mobile is that there's kind of a 20-80 rule at play. So not the 80-20 rule, but flipping that and the 20-80 rule. When you look at your website analytics, the chances are, or even just when you sit around the table and talk with your coworkers or maybe some of your clients about what they use the most on your website, there's probably about 20% of your website content that meets the needs of about 80% of the people who are visiting your website. So about 20% of your content is what people are looking for or looking at 80% of the time. So particularly if you have a really deep and content-rich website, you might be able to just focus on optimizing for mobile that 20% of the content that 80% of the people are looking for or searching for, or that you think is going to be most valuable for them, so that you're not having to rework every page of your website for mobile. That said, most mobile websites always have a link back to the full site. So if somebody doesn't find what they're looking for in the 20% that you've optimized for mobile, they can still get to your full site. And also, if you're using responsive website design or you're using a mobile template, it may be that it's very easy for you to optimize all content on your website for use on mobile. But if that's not the case for your organization and you don't want to start over from scratch, you can probably provide a small subsection of your content and still really provide a lot of value to the people that are searching for you or searching for information for the clients you're trying to serve. Let me just pause there. I know that both Xander and Pat have done some work with mobile websites. Maybe Brian, you have some experience with this as well. Any experience that you have to lend about how to think about the content that you're offering? Right now, I know we're talking about mobile websites. It may start to bleed into a little bit content you put into apps. But any experience you can lend about helping people think about the content that they want to optimize for viewing on a mobile device?
Well, this is Xander, and just really quickly, the one thing that has been really helpful when talking with various partners and administrators of websites is when folks are looking to review the content that's on their site in general, we really encourage them to think about the fact that if there's a piece of content that is optimized for mobile, especially for the populations that we're reaching out to, it oftentimes, if it's optimized for mobile, it will actually look better on their desktop. A simplified, more streamlined version of especially text and legal content, legal information, oftentimes when you're simplifying that so that it looks good on a smaller screen, what you're also doing at the same time is making it more accessible on a desktop as well. So that's one way of, rather than thinking about optimizing your content for mobile, thinking about it as a way of just optimizing your content.
Yes, this is Pat from Immigration Advocates Network, or Pro Bono Net. And along those lines, we find that as we think about the space that we have on a mobile application and choosing our language carefully, we end up with a streamlined language, which is better in any venue. And also, as an aside, one of our efforts as we've developed some more recent mobile applications has been to think about language, the language that we use, and the language accessibility for clients. So we're moving toward more of a plain language approach, and that fits in well with economy of spaces in addition.
Both great points.
One tip that I've got on the mobile delivery, one of the big reasons that LSNTAP moved all of our videos off of our own website and our proprietary player to YouTube was that it automatically resizes, provides in mobile accessible format, and it just ahead of the curve there. So made it much easier for people to access our videos.
Awesome. Thanks all, and keep those coming. I'll try to breathe every once in a while and ask you to share more tips like that. But I really love this idea that both Xander and Pat touched on, that by quote unquote optimizing for mobile, we're really forcing ourselves to get to the point and write as convey an idea in as few and simple of language as possible, fewest words and simple of language as possible, and that's actually in the end really good for everybody. It helps us reach more clients and be accessible wherever they're at, whether that's they're looking at your web or looking at your site from their computer, from a tablet, or from their phone. So it's actually really good hygiene in a way to think about simplifying everything for mobile, because it benefits across platforms, or across devices, I should say. Great, thanks. So think about what mobile users want. Again, I've already talked about that 20/80 rule. They're more likely when they're searching on a mobile device, just to be really kind of practical about how people use their mobiles. They're more likely to be looking at you while distracted, or searching for something while distracted, looking at your site while distracted. They're on their way to you. They're on the bus. They're they're riding their bike, they're walking down the street, and they're looking at their phone with one hand, and they are searching with their thumb. And so thinking about that as you think about what you're writing and how much content you're putting on there and how long that content is, just think about, like, what do our users really need and what's digestible to them when they're looking at their phone while distracted, while on the move, and while searching with a thumb. And force yourself to think about what's like the one service for you all. It may actually be more than one service, but excuse me, I normally tell organizations to try to think about what's the one service that we offer that's most valuable to our clients, that we want to make sure they can find and use while they're on their mobile. If you had to think about what that one service is, I'm just curious to have people, if you can, off the top of your head, chat in using that chat window, what's the one service that you would want people to be able to use regardless of what device they're coming to you from? Is it a form that they need to fill out? Is it an explanation of a process? Is it access to a database? Is there one thing that you can think of in chat-in that you know you would want to make sure is accessible to people via mobile? I'll give you a little time on that one because I know it's a little bit of a tougher question. So what's the one service or the one thing you want people to be able to do regardless of where they're coming to you from? So David is saying intake triage. Education about a specific legal problem area, great. So landlord-tenant issues, that's a good one. Great, thanks, Gray. Anybody else, one thing that you know is really valuable you want clients to be able to access? Or supporters, perhaps. Yeah, Russ, I love that you said find office locations and phone numbers. Sometimes it doesn't have to be complicated. It's simple. We know that they're on the move. They're probably just trying to figure out where the heck we are, or they want to find where their closest legal aid office is that could help them or give them advice on an issue. Date, location of clinics. Okay, great. Great ideas, everybody. These are awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so really try to think about what your mobile users want. Because the other thing is you don't want to design something that your users aren't really going to use. You don't want to put it there because you think it's important, then to find out that really all that users wanted was your phone number and directions to your office. I mentioned responsive design. If you happen to be in a threshold where you're looking to redesign your website from scratch, or even if you're not, again, depending on what content management system you might currently be using, if you're using like a content management system or a blogified content management system like WordPress, a lot of them have mobile templates for tablets and phones built in. Or if you're building from scratch, you can also look at using responsive design to build a site that will shrink down and look right on different devices. So there's a few different ways that you can do that. So again, another good starting place if you haven't done a lot with intentionally designing your website for mobile yet. In addition to some of the suggestions we've heard already, if you're not the web administrator, if you're on this call right now and you're not the web administrator, talk to your web administrator about where your site is hosted and see if there are already mobile templates available, because it could be that by switching templates, you could actually very quickly optimize, or at least take the first steps to get your site a little bit more mobile friendly. Great, thanks, Karen. I'm still looking at some of these suggestions about wanting people to be able to make a donation. Yes, that's very popular. Somebody also mentioned the map, the hotline number, all really good. Yeah, so I've talked a lot about clients, I've mentioned supporters, but even wanting to make it simple for people to make a donation, that's another great idea. So beyond thinking about how you can share your information and content through your website and how that's looking and optimized for mobile devices, you can also think about creating a simple app. Of course, I think we're probably all familiar that an app is a little different than accessing your website. You usually download it. A lot of times, not always, a lot of times when you have an app on your phone, a native app on your phone, whether that's Android or iPhone, you can access it offline. That's not always the case. But I would really encourage you to think critically about why you might want to have an app, what your users really would do with an app, and if you truly have the resources to maintain and update and market an app to make sure that you get your return on it. So what you're seeing on screen is an example of an app that's really just presenting blog content. So it's not a very complicated app. It's just a way, in this example, I don't know if you recognize those eyeballs, but it's Seth Godin. And it's his app, which is basically just serving up his blog content in a way that users can access it offline. So if you have a really rich blog, for example, and you want people to be able to access it offline and have it push updates to their phone, that might be something you'd consider an app for. And the examples of the tools on this slide, like App Maker, it actually should be Sweb apps. That's a typo, sorry, not Swep apps, Sweb apps. Those two are kind of drag and drop type create your own app interfaces where you could create an app, quote unquote, without needing to code, without needing a programmer, without needing any language of programming or coding, but they're going to be limited in their functionality. It's going to let you put a map. It's going to let you put a contact page. It's going to let you put content from your blog. It might let you put a welcome page, but it's kind of very drag and drop for you to develop a basic app. Again, depending on your users, depending on your needs, that might be good. Maybe you just want to make sure that they can access all that information and have it available to them offline because they don't have big, expensive data plans or they don't have high-speed bandwidth or high-speed connection. So you want to make sure that all those basics are available to them in an app that they can access offline. But those are really simple. The costs there are a little bit misleading. Like usually you could start a simple version. They have you do kind of an initiation fee or a one-time fee of $100 or $200 or $300, and then you pay a monthly hosting fee. But again, these are not very custom apps. They're going to be a little bit limited, so they may not be a silver bullet, and you may need a programmer. But again, you know, it's worth checking out just to kind of see what you could do, drag and drop, what you could do in-house without really going into an expensive app development process. But before you use a programmer or any of these drag and drop things, it's just really important, I think, to start with the strategy. Do we have a problem that having an app can help us solve? You know, are we hearing something from our users that they really need from us that an app could help us address? And do we have the content to keep it up to date, the staff or the resources to keep it up to date? And do we have the marketing power we need to make sure people know about this app so that they actually find it and install it? So I think this is another good place for me to just pause and see if Brian or Pat or Xander, who've done some work with apps in the legal space, have any advice to share about kind of starting with the problem and designing from there. So Xander, Pat, or Brian, anything that you would add here from your experience?
I mean, the two quick tips that I have is that if you're going to do an app, especially targeted at low-income communities, make sure that it's usable offline in case individuals run out of data or they're in an area where their service may not be that good. Second thing is, don't just replicate the website. There needs to be something that you are providing additionally. If you have limited resources and you're considering either doing an app or updating website to mobile, I would definitely do the update to website to mobile first. You need that different target audience for the app or that different functionality to make it really useful. The update costs also are not insignificant. They need to be budgeted in.
From a content development perspective, you know, I don't have the technological expertise. I'm the attorney on staff, so I would do the writing of content. And I found that there were parameters. There were ways in which the information could be used or connected or accessed that dictated sort of my word choice and how I arranged information. So I think it's important to understand what are the parameters and what can the device do so that the words on the page make sense and function the way you intend them to. Right.
Great. Thanks, Pat. And let's just pause there. I'll remind everyone that if you do have questions, you can chat them in. You can also *6 to unmute yourself. I haven't seen any questions come in, Brian. Keep me honest there. But if anybody does have questions, feel free to *6 to unmute. And if you've got questions about what we've covered so far, about websites, or we're just starting to get into taking apps and a couple of tools to create a simple app, and we'll start looking at some examples. But are there any questions thus far? Okay, we will press on. Another example of kind of a simpler way than creating an app that would allow you to engage users in a different way via mobile is using QR codes. So, you know, as again, I'm sure many of you know, you snap a photo of the QR code, or you hold your phone over the QR code. You have to have a QR code or camera that reads QR codes on your phone, and it can direct people to a mobile optimized page of your website that invites them to take some action or to learn something more about what they're interested in. So it can be a way to dabble in mobile service delivery. Here's an example of a tablet or a mobile-friendly page that was created by Montana LawHelp on the Montana LawHelp platform. And as you can see, super, super simple. So there's basically two big obvious choices that you could do. So when they sat down and they asked, what's the one thing that we really think our users need access to, that we want to provide them to, it was, or provide them via mobile, it was self-help info and forms and connecting them with attorneys and legal help. Again, you can see that they can find out more info about Montana LawHelp, they can provide feedback, and as I mentioned before, they can visit the full site if they want more. But here's an example of where you have to kind of make a big bet on what users are going to want and simplify, simplify, simplify. I'm going to ask Xander to share a little bit more about this example since he's worked with that LawHelp platform for quite a bit and I think has more experience with this example than I do.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Xander Karsten. I'm the LawHelp program coordinator here at Pro Bono Net, and this is an example of the mobile LawHelp platform itself. And what we did working through a TIG grant with Montana Legal Services and creating this as currently we have 6 LawHelp sites that are launched on the mobile platform itself, including Washington, California, DC, New York, and there are others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But basically, because mobile has a very small screen, and to be very clear on this, tablets on LawHelp continue to route to the full site because when we did testing, that's what our site was fine on tablets, but it was really on mobile phones specifically. So just as one of those things, as you're testing your own site, the actual ratios of the screen sizes does make a difference and can help you to really target the changes that you want to make. And essentially for LawHelp, because it is such a content-rich site, all of our states have really great content and content that people are using whether or not their sites are mobile optimized. What we've done is just sort of put this navigation structure in place. The content remains the same, but it allows our partners to select specific pieces of content so that they don't have to have everything if they don't want everything accessible to mobile users. Some sites have chosen to limit it to certain topics or certain types of content. And then similar to the full site itself, it provides other resources and the organizations, which is the way that our sites themselves are just sort of structured from the back end. And we've had really great success with this. In June, we launched our Spanish mirror site for mobile on LawHelp New York, and are currently in the pilot process with that, and that's also through a TIG grant with LawHelp New York and Legal Assistance of Western New York. And if folks have kind of questions, if LawHelp folks have questions about implementing this on their sites, or if just anyone else has questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, let's look at a few other examples. And Xander, feel free to keep chiming in as we look at these other examples if something is sparked for you. And again, folks, at any point, feel free to chat in those questions. So we'll look at another example, and actually I'm going to have Pat Malone from Immigration Advocate Network talk about this. This is the citizenshipworks.org mobile app. So again, now we're looking at an app, not just a mobile optimized website, and so you'll hear and you can just see even from the screenshots, there's a different set of functionality here. So it's a little bit deeper than serving up just content or info. There's more opportunity for folks to get services and to engage. Pat, do you want to talk a little bit more about the citizenshipworks.org mobile app?
Sure. So citizenshipworks.org is also a website and which has more function. and different features, and this is a way of providing some of that information and connecting folks to those resources. For example, in both locations we have our National Legal Services, Immigration Legal Services directories so that people can find a lawyer and search by zip code, for example. On this tool, this is a sort of public-facing tool, so it has information about eligibility, how to study for the citizenship tests, and also links to other resources. The website itself is a tool that we use with partners to help people fill out the forms, and it's an online interview that finds out about people's eligibility and asks the questions that fill in the citizenship application forms. So the two are, separate and have some complementary and overlapping function, but also have their own function as well. And as I mentioned in my chat, we have a couple of other mobile applications that we've developed that are less sophisticated and have less features, but are also, I think, like visually wonderful and fun to use. One is Pocket DACA, which helps some young immigrants find out about whether they're eligible for a legal immigration status. And then Imigo, which we developed with the National Council of La Raza, and it has some basic information about immigration, and that is designed for lay advocates, for non-attorneys.
Okay, now I'm trying to show you guys there it is. I think you can see it now, right? I'm trying to show you the screenshots of Pocket DACA. Can somebody chime in and let me know if you can see that? My window is now being shared, I think, right?
Yes.
I can see
Yes,
it.
now I can see it.
Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry, I'm a little slow on the uptake here. So this is that tool that Pat was just talking about, Pocket DACA. So you can get a sense. I'm just on the Google Play Store. This is also on the iPhone, available on iPhone. But you can just get a sense of the kinds of content that are being served up through this app. Pat, anything else you would want to say about this as I'm just quickly flipping through it? I know you just spoke to it a bit, but I don't know if seeing these slides makes you bring up any or sparks any other comments for you.
Right, sure. Well, a feature like this, the poll, is not so much for data gathering, although we've used it for that, as also a way to engage users. And we have used some of the data to identify hurdles, reasons why people have not applied, for example, and shared that with partners and in some cases with funders who are interested in knowing what are the obstacles to applying for DACA.
Very cool. And news, connecting them to local organizations and being able to map those so they can see the closest organizations, more information about screening, and this leads to eligibility. This section leads to the eligibility qualifications, correct?
That's right. That's an interactive interview that helps people find out whether they might be eligible. Because it's an outreach tool and an educational tool, it's not a very rigorous legal screening. It just touches on some of the high points around whether the person's the right age or came to the country at the right time or meets the education requirements. So it walks the user through a series of questions, and then depending on the yes or no answer or date cutoffs that we have calculated into the device, it lets them know, yes, it appears you might be eligible, and here's a link to our legal services directory to find out about legal services near you, or, here's a list of events to find out if there's a workshop coming up near you, and more information that hopefully encourages people to follow up and find out more.
Very cool. And then just to give folks a sense, here's that Imigo app.
Sorry, Lindsey, I'm losing you on the sound.
Are you guys still able to hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. The lady came on and told me there was something that wasn't a valid menu option. I might have pressed something by accident. So I was just saying, so here's the other app that Pat was talking about, the Imigo app. And just to give you, again, I don't think we have to spend a ton of time here, but just to give you a sense of the different types of content being served up through apps. So here you can see what it would look like when somebody comes to it on a mobile phone. They can find out about upcoming training and events, the latest immigration news, again, legal help finder. Anything else you would want to highlight about this one, Pat?
Well, on this one in the information or the immigration basics, this one is where we really thought a lot about language and usability, and that was fun. That was fun to draft and fun to think about what is most helpful information for people who are not lawyers. So that's what I would point out on this. And once again, it's that same directory that's available on our website is coming up in these different instances on our mobile application. So it's great to have this, one tool that can be used in so many different mobile applications.
Very cool. So another example, now this is kind of flipping it to the supporter. So we had Karen, or I think it was Karen earlier, asked about fundraising and making a donation. Now this is a different kind of support. Obviously, this is about activating attorneys or lawyers that are interested in taking on pro bono cases. So in Arkansas, they did an iPro Bono app that was targeted for use by lawyers and allowed them to find, view, filter, and request pro bono cases that they wanted to take on. There was also an RSS feed that was feeding up the latest justice news. People could view cases or filter cases by county or by keyword or issue. So really interesting example of an app that's trying to reach a totally different audience. So we've been mostly talking about apps that are serving up content or services to your clients, but here's an example of where you could help connect clients to more pro bono legal services by making it really easy for lawyers in your area to find a case that they want to take on, to track their cases, to follow the results of other cases. So a very interesting example. There's a few examples here that I think I'll go through a little bit quickly so that we've got time to talk more with about the legal examples and hear more from the people on the call that have legal examples. But just to give you a sense of the depth and breadth of cool apps that are out there, and probably many of you are using things like this on your phone. Well, maybe not the Winona County Historical Society app, but you never know. So this is an example of an app that was created by the Historical Society so people could create their own walking tours of this historical downtown. This is one that I think many people are familiar with. If not, it's really cool. You might want to check it out. This is to check out what seafood is on the bad list or the good list in terms of its harmfulness to the environment or how healthy it is for us. And this is by the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California, and it kind of gives you a green, yellow, or a red in terms of fish that you can eat, in terms of how they're fished, whether it's sustainable fishing practices, and how healthy it is for you. Circle of Six is one of my personal favorites, really interesting and compelling app that is about trying to reduce violence and attacks, particularly on college campuses or for higher ed students, and particularly women, to try to help them avoid situations where they'll be subjected to on-campus violence. So Circle of Six allows them to put 6 of their closest friends or most trusted contacts into the app, into their contact list. And then there are 3 buttons, that they can press that will immediately signal those 6 trusted people. It's kind of like a different version of a distress signal depending on how they are. So if they click the car icon, it automatically sends a text message to these 6 people that says, I need you to come get me. I'm not safe. I feel uncomfortable. And it gives GPS coordinates of where that person is. If they click the chat bubble, it asks them to create a distraction, so to call them or to text them because they're in a situation that they want to get out of and they need a distraction. And then if you click the call button, it actually calls emergency services. And again, with all of these, it's using their geolocation data to tell the people where they are so that they can help. So really interesting way of providing service for college-age women with smartphones. More with QR codes. I think we've already talked about those, so we won't talk about that much. So I would like to start the conversation about conversations with constituents, which mostly is about texting or SMS, both broadcast as well as two-way. But before I do that, this is a great time to pause and see if there are any questions or what's really resonating with you all. Is there something that you've heard in the app examples or in the talk about optimizing website that you're eager to dive into more and start working on? Or Brian, perhaps there's some chat that I've missed where there's a question that came up. Any questions, comments, things that are really resonating with you that you know you're going to try to start working on ASAP?
I don't know, one of the applications that has definitely had a lot of interest from legal services community is what can be done to help individuals track wages for wage theft type cases, something that links in with GPS for local location, and then a client can use it to log things discreetly and then be able to transfer that information directly to an advocate. I know that a few states have worked on some simple versions of that, but there's definitely a lot more interest and need in that particular locate or that space.
Very interesting. Okay. And I'm also just going to pause. Brian, are you able to hear me okay, or are there audio issues that I need to try to address?
I can definitely hear you.
I see that Amy said that I was a little quiet. People rarely tell me that, Amy, just so you know. I'm going to hold my microphone a little closer to my face just to try to help, but if I am low, turn up your volume. I'm low for you too as well, Xander. Oh, no, you can hear okay too. I got it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Just flag me if it gets bad. I'll keep my microphone close to my face. To spare my office space, I won't talk louder, but I hope that'll be better. Any other questions or comments from folks on the line about their experience with optimizing sites for mobile or thinking about apps that might be of value to your clients or supporters or constituents? Okay, silence as consent to press on. One sidebar that I'll mention, I don't know how familiar many of you organizations or many of you are with an organization called Caravan Studios. You probably know TechSoup, and Caravan Studios is actually a project of TechSoup. And Marnie Webb, who was co-CEO of TechSoup, ended up starting this kind of incubated project called Caravan Studios. And they're doing a lot of work in the app space right now. And none of the apps are specifically focused on the legal field necessarily, but they're doing a lot of experimenting and learning and have had some great success. And it might be worth checking out if you're thinking creatively about apps or services that you can offer. Right now they've been getting a lot of publicity for an app that they're working on called Range, which is all about helping kids out of school over the summer or families with kids out of school over summer find the free and reduced lunch programs or meal programs that kids normally get automatically when they're in school, and then they know that they have breakfast and lunch because by going to school they get that free or reduced school lunch. But in the summer a lot of kids go hungry because they're not in school, and either they're not aware of or not sure about using those free lunch or free meal programs during summer hours and outside of school. So Range is all about making sure people know where those programs are and finding them. And that's actually a two-way communication. So some interesting stuff going on there if you're curious to check out some more examples. And then I will, thanks David for your question. You all can see it in the chat window, and I welcome you to respond via chat or *6 to unmute. But wondering if others on the call have tried GLS's wage app and what were the results. So anybody on the call have any experience with GLS's wage app? *6 to unmute, or you could chat into David as well. David, you either have people IMing you directly or a shy group, or we don't have a lot of experience with GLS's wage app. Anybody slow to find their *6 that has experience with this? All right, David, so that might be something that we have to continue to look into. Sorry that I couldn't help you get a little bit more feedback on that. All right, I will continue on with having conversations with constituents, and we'll pause for questions again momentarily. So conversations with constituents, a big and somewhat straightforward and understandable way to do this using mobile is to send text messages. So I don't know if you remember, but back on that very early slide I showed you with data, I think the data point was something like 81% of people are using their phones to send and receive text messages. Again, that one slide on the how people were using their phones was from early 2013. So I have to imagine that 81% has gone up. So lots of people are communicating by text messages, not just our teens and our tweens, but really everybody is doing a lot with texting. And where many of us, and particularly perhaps many of people that are on a reduced cell phone plan might be limited in their data, it's very common for many cell phone plans now to come with unlimited text. So may not be as much of a limitation for some of the people that we're trying to reach as trying to drive them to an online website, which forces them to use their data plan, or may be dependent on bandwidth quality like Brian was talking about earlier. So sending text to reach our constituents, to share information with them, to engage in a dialogue with them, to get them to opt in, to get them to look at content, videos, or drive them to our websites can be really effective. And there's a number of different ways that you can do that depending on what scale you're looking to do it on. So a really super simple way that's not officially supported or 100% reliable is you can actually just send a text to a phone from your email client. So, for example, you could dial area code plus phone number at cellphonecarrier.com, and that would actually send, as long as you've limited to 160 characters, which is the size of a text message, it could send a text message from your email inbox to somebody's phone. Okay, if you just want to send a few, but probably not super scalable. So beyond that, we want to start looking at how you could send broadcast texts. So again, this presumes, going back to what I started with, you have to start with the basics. Sending broadcast text assumes that you already have a strategy in place and have been collecting mobile phone numbers and permission to contact people via their mobile phone numbers. So if you haven't, I would definitely encourage you to start looking at all of your forms, your intake forms, your triage forms, your donation forms, your forms to register for events, trainings, fundraisers, whatever it might be, whether they're online forms or they're paper forms. Start adding cell phone as a field to all of those, and an opt-in box for people to be kept up to date by text message, because that's step one to be able to send broadcast text, is that you actually have the numbers, you've got a data system to keep track of them somehow. And again, that can live outside of a case management or a client tracking system, so it's okay if you don't have that, because a lot of the broadcast text providers have that data management piece built in. It's part of the service they provide to you. So if you've been collecting cell phone numbers, you can start sending some broadcast text. So reminding people that it's voting day. In New York and New Jersey, and I know we've got a few of you from New York and New Jersey on the line, there recently was a campaign where on election day you could text a short code number, text the word vote to 8878, and we'll tell you where your nearest polling place is, or where you should be casting your vote, where your polling station is. So some really interesting examples of broadcast text, and again, there's a number of different providers now that are making it easier for you to send broadcast text. So Mobile Commons is one example that comes to mind. There are bigger solutions as well that are perhaps more oriented at big for-profit corporations, but a lot of these providers will allow you to send, like Mobile Cause is another one. Mobile Cause is a very affordable one. In fact, I think I have a slide for that one, so let me jump to that and we'll come back. Mobile Cause, it's 1,000 texts a month starting at $69. So you can do broadcast text messages up to $1,000 a month, $69. So it's pretty affordable. Or again, if you're looking to do this at a really low scale, other than sending them from your email inbox, you could use something like Google Voice to send text messages 5 at a time for free right from your Google inbox or your Google Voice app, and send text messages that way. So there's lots of platforms that are making it easier. Sorry, I'm going to back up to that slide now, to send broadcast text, and some really interesting and compelling applications of why you would do this. So if you aren't already asking people for their cell phone numbers, there's a few different ways that you can do that. The one is the one I've already told you, which is just start asking people for cell phone numbers at every turn, on every form, at every event, at every class. You can also actually do a campaign, like a texting campaign, to get people to sign up. So text a word, text subscribe to short code to sign up for our text notification list or to stay informed, or even putting an app. And again, a lot of these broadcast text messaging solutions include widgets that you could put on your website that look like this Obama one that you see here, that would allow you to start getting people to sign up for, share their cell phone numbers and sign up for text alerts on your website. So you could add it as a piece on your website. So start building your list. Those are 3 good ways to start building your list. Besides just broadcasting information, you can also use text messages to have 2-way conversations. And that's not just you write them and they write you back. Again, I may be telling you stuff you know, but you can actually set up branch logic so that if somebody, you can kind of follow it along on the screen here. If somebody texts help to your short code text message, it automatically will send them back this message. There can be branch logic that says if they reply yes, give them this message. If they say no, say we've got another event coming up on the 15th. Do you want to do that? So you can actually set up a whole logic, branch logic set of responses so that whether they're saying yes or no, you can actually have a 2-way conversation with them that's automated, although it would feel personal. So that's really interesting. It has some interesting applications, I think, in the legal aid world as well. And you really can have a lot of different branch points. Not only can you do branching logic to kind of respond to yes, no, again, a lot of the broadcast text or the text solution providers, SMS solution providers, will not only let you set up the branching logic, but they will let you connect your text to a database. So if somebody texts a word, it searches for it in your database, and it returns the corresponding response. So this is a different fish app or fish text message, but like the Monterey Bay one that we were looking at. So I can just text the name of the fish. My SMS is connected through the back-end platform into this database, and it will look at my database and return the proper response. So this example is from Blue Ocean Institute. People get that automatic response, which is pretty cool. And again, I mentioned Mobile Commons. This is an example or case study that is actually powered by the Mobile Commons text platform or solution. You can also use text to collect information to help you understand an issue, to help you respond to problems, to help you survey your clients or constituents. So this is an example of people responding or texting in after a disaster, what they need, where they need help, and starting to get a heat map, basically, based on the number of text messages that came from a certain cell phone tower of where the need is greatest and where volunteer teams should be deployed to. So also very interesting. I've also seen an example of this with an app. After the BP oil spills down in the Gulf Coast, there was an app that allowed citizens to engage by reporting oil spills that they saw so that all the well-meaning volunteers and the aid organizations could make sure that they were directing resources to the right places.
So there's a quick question here. Is it possible to switch between English and Spanish on Pocket DACA? Also, are there the same resources available in each language, or is it different?
Hey, this is Pat. So yes, it is possible to switch between English and Spanish on each side. In theory, the same resources are available. Sometimes it's a matter of updating or uploading resources to both sides for both of the language versions. But yes, we do have a Spanish version available. Not on the Imago, too. That question came up as well. That would be nice. We think that would be useful, but I don't know whether there's a funding or a plan in place to go for Spanish.
Great. Thanks, Brian, for raising that question, and Pat for your help. I see that Russ also raised a question about has anyone looked at frontline SMS? I have not looked at this example, Russ. Do others on the call have experience with frontline SMS, or Russ, maybe you do, and you'd like to share a little bit more by *6ing to unmute yourself? Anyone have comments or feedback to share on frontline SMS, experience with that?
Yeah, this is Xander, and just really quickly, because I know that we'll talk about this in a bit, but Frontline, for those of you who don't know, Frontline SMS is piloting, and Russ pushed through a really great page on it, is piloting some SMS projects for legal aid with LSC. And they're definitely, when you're thinking about, if you're thinking about providing especially referral information for your site, SMS, Frontline, as well as Twilio and some of the other providers are definitely worth looking to, especially sort of considering some of the costs that can be involved and attached.
Thank you so much, Xander. That's great. Okay, so the SMS options, the texting options, not just one way, not just broadcast. It's a way for you to collect information from clients, constituents. It's a way for you to push out information. And it's a sophisticated way, if you want it to be, for you to have two-way conversations or share information from a database, share referrals, the example that Xander gave. So I already talked a little bit about these two low-cost options for sending text. Let's look at a couple of more full-featured options. We did look at an example from Mobile Commons. Again, here's an example where some of these providers are going to allow you to do more of the two-way text messaging, connecting to a database on the back end, doing that branch logic to answer questions for folks. So Mobile Commons, Mobile Accord, a couple of examples. Again, these can start to get pricey, especially Click-a-Tell. Most of the, well, a lot of the people, not most, but a lot of the people using Click-a-Tell are pretty high budget, for-profit companies. But if you really feel like there's an opportunity for you to deliver service in a compelling way to your constituents via text messaging, there's some great options out there. But it all starts with having a good list of opt-in text messages. As you can imagine, texting is a really great way if any of you are serving younger clients to reach younger clients. But as I said, just looking at the demographics, we're not talking just about teens and tweens here. This example of a family center is, of course, centered on teens. They had always emailed their teen volunteers to get them to sign up for a mentoring spot with the, I think it was like the 3rd through 4th graders in their local elementary school. And then they just gradually stopped responding to email, which probably, if all of you all have teenage children, you have found that same thing. In fact, they stopped responding to their phone messages or answering their phone and their text messages as well. But in any case, they realized that by just texting responses to their teen volunteers, they could actually get them signed up same day, get them into the classroom, and get things done in a way that was much more efficient. Citizenship Works has also had some success with a nationwide text messaging campaign. Pat, I can call on you to talk a little bit more about this one as well, right?
Sure.
Do you have more that you can share? Okay, great.
Yes.
Great.
So, right, if someone texts citizenship to 877-877 or Ciudadanía, then that person will be prompted for a zip code and can enter their zip code and get in response a listing for a nearby legal office for help.
Great. And do you, I know I'm putting you on the spot, Pat, and this may not be your area, but any sense of the uptake on this or the response rate? Are a lot of people using it, or any kind of data that talks about how it's worked so far?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure that data's out there, but I'm sorry that I don't have that.
No, I totally put you on the spot, so no worries. We'll look for it if we want it. Great. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm just seeing Brian's comment in the chat, and I totally love it. This is so true that your mother now is texting because your daughter does. Yeah, the grandparent effect. First, they all joined Facebook to connect with their grandchildren, and then all their grandchildren left Facebook, and so now they're all texting. So yes, a lot of the grandparents and the baby boomers are using text to keep in touch with their kids or their grandkids. Very common. So lots of people are really comfortable and used to communicating this way now. And again, you know, some people I think worry when they're thinking about a text messaging campaign that they're going to be in people's faces. But as you see here, there's always an opt-out message or always an opt-out option, just like there is on an email newsletter. You can unsubscribe, you can stop, you can quit. And the other fascinating thing about text messages is 99% of text messages get read. And 80% of those text messages get read in the first 3 minutes. So that's pretty amazing. If any of you are, sorry, Brian, we can hear you typing again. I'm going to ask you to put yourself back on mute. Apologies. So if any of you are sending email newsletters and are familiar with your open rates on your email newsletters or your click-through rates, the data tells us now that, again, 99% of text messages get read. They're hard to ignore, these text messages. 80% of those are being read in the first 3 minutes of being received, and the response rate between, or the click-through rate is 4 times higher on a text message than it is on an email or an email newsletter. So if you're trying to get people to take some action, they're 4 times more likely to do it in response to a text that you send them versus an email that you send them. So that's pretty amazing. You know, we consider an email newsletter read rate of 15% is good. We think that's good. And again, 99% of texts get opened. So that says a lot for our ability to actually reach the people we want to reach by figuring out what they want to know and texting them that information. Let me pause there to see if there's any questions or comments about texting so far. Brian, Xander, Pat, anything else that you'd add on texting or text campaigns, particularly other examples you know from the legal field, or are there questions that have come in or questions that folks want to *6 and raise?
Hey,
oh, Pat, I just see your chat now that you've got a pilot with more texting function. Would love to hear more about that.
Sure. Yeah, as I mentioned before, Citizenship Works is a project with partners, and some of our partners through one of our New York grants is trying now a sort of more scheduled series of texting reminders. When a client attends a workshop or event, that person can text a code to sign up for a series of reminders. So, for example, the first reminder text the person would receive is following the event is, have you completed your application? And if the person answers no, then they would be connected to that legal directory. And if the person answers yes, then the next question that comes in is, have you mailed it? If no, then there's some information about how to mail it. You know, if yes, it moves on to additional questions about receiving a notice from immigration services on, you know, next steps for taking biometrics, and so on. And of course, at any point, a person can disengage with the series of texts. And in addition, when a person has answered no to any one step, then the service lays off for a couple of weeks and then checks in, you know, at some measured time later to follow up. So the organizations that have hosted these events can follow sort of through more general data, not sort of person by person, how far along people are in the process and who's completed, you know, who's actually mailed in a citizenship application.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing more about that. Not a legal example, but it makes me think of there's a number of healthcare providers that are using texting to help people stick to a treatment course. So to make sure that there's an example in India where tuberculosis is a problem and it's treatable, but it's a very drawn-out treatment process, and people often forget to take their meds or they take the wrong ones. And so healthcare providers are using text messaging to remind clients when to take the drugs and which drugs to take at that time, so that they're actually improving people's recovery rate because they're following the treatment course correctly. Interesting question from Rochelle. Brian, I don't know if you're seeing that one, but Mobile Commons is pretty pricey for most, and I'm assuming Rochelle's from a smaller legal aid organization. Is there any possibility to do kind of a group subscription to something like that? I don't know if that's possible or something like that would work.
That's definitely an interesting question.
Or even if the provider allows it, that would be another interesting question.
I mean, it's definitely worth reaching out to them on an individual basis, but additionally, if there are several organizations that are interested, I'm happy to try to approach them and work with them also. We've definitely had vendors respond positively if there's several people who are interested from the nonprofit angle.
And this is Xander at Pro Bono Net. Speaking to does the vendor allow it? They do, and that's how we've actually been able to do the national SMS campaigns with the TIG through Georgia Legal Services. That we have divided one account into sub-accounts. So just as an FYI, that is possible. That's something that they do.
Great. And did I hear another voice there too? Okay, that's really great to hear, Xander. Thanks for sharing that. And Brian, thanks for your offer of help there. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I've got a few slides left that I just want to share. Another great texting example, very interesting just in terms of the impacts that it's had. You know, probably when many of us were younger, the teen hotlines, if folks were struggling with or thinking about suicide, were phone numbers. And as it turns out, most teens don't want to call such a number these days. And so this organization set up Text for Life, where people could actually have a text conversation if they were having a really hard time, and text somebody and talk about it. And they get 20 times as many text sessions, or at least in 2012, the data was that they got 20 times more text sessions than phone calls. So really compelling just in terms of the impact that it can have. And you can see here the CEO talking about that it's really intimate when you're having these thoughts to have to talk to somebody on the other end. And again, we just know that teens these days, I'm dating myself. That sounded awful. But they're not real big phone callers. They don't use the phone the way probably many of us on the phone grew up learning to use the phone. You know, it's very natural and normal for them to have a conversation via text, whereas it would be very unnatural for them to make a phone call. So kind of a very interesting example of just knowing your user. And then some more text and SMS examples that I'm going to let Xander speak to that are being, I think, run by Georgia Legal Services. Is that right, Xander?
Yeah. So this is a SMS campaign, and it consists of 4 separate SMS campaigns in 4 different states, and it's through a TIG with the Georgia Legal Services program. And essentially, we used Mobile Commons and went with Mobile Commons because of that sub-account option for the service. And the 4 programs, which are up on your screen, all decided to target different groups and with different legal needs, and represent a fairly good cross-section of rural versus urban, and also sort of general legal issues versus very specific legal issues. So, for example, Illinois, focused on expungement of juvenile criminal records, and Washington really focused on driver's license reinstatement. And those tend to be much more narrowly focused, narrowly targeted issues, as opposed to more general, like consumer rights or immigration and domestic violence information in Georgia and New York, respectively. Also, just sort of pulling out from this above and beyond the actual SMS nitty-gritty, one of the things that was really interesting about this particular project is that we used free range to create our outreach materials, and that kind of combination of media, that media toolkit, that outreach toolkit, was then customized by each program. We all know that it's one thing to have this really great SMS system, but getting the word out can oftentimes be the biggest barrier, even beyond actually getting the SMS program up and running. And by partnering with other agencies and creating a templative version that various partners can customize helped to really spread the cost and the cost-sharing burden. In this case, it was through a TIG, but if you're looking to go out on your own and do your own SMS and your campaigns, and you want to partner with other folks to share that, that's one way to do it. The media toolkit will also be available as part of this TIG in the coming months or so. So that's sort of the bird's eye view. If you have obviously questions or follow-up, feel free to email me. I put my email out there earlier, but I can put it out again. So thanks.
Thanks, Xander. That's great. Very cool, and a great variety of examples, and really appreciate your emphasis of the importance of marketing so people are actually using the SMS campaign. Here you can just see an example of what Xander was just describing. This, I presume, would be from Washington State because it's about driver's license reinstatement. You can see they texted the keyword to start the conversation. They get these questions that they have to respond to, 1, 2, or 3, as to why their license was suspended. They respond, and they get that automated branch logic response for what they need to do next, and it continues on like that. So as Xander was talking about, an interesting example, and you can see here his point about publicity being emphasized. And with the example of Illinois debuting their service at a big conference. I'm going to skip over Rate Your Ride for now because it's a little bit of an outlier, and make sure we have time to talk about these last couple of slides about supporting staff in the field. So the last way we can talk about service delivery through mobile, or at least that we're going to talk about today, is just talking about allowing staff to either view or collect data while they're out in the field. So whether that's from clients, whether that's from supporters, whether that's citizens, they can, via their mobile, access the client database or the constituent management database, or, in the case of an organization that's primarily reliant on case management systems, many of you may be able to give your staff access to case management systems while they're in the field, so that when they are doing field work or they're meeting with clients or connecting with constituents, they can actually be creating case notes, updating files, updating records at the same time. So it's not something that they have to go back to the office or they have to VPN in to be able to do that. We can really enable that real time now. Here you can see an old example of the Salesforce database where people are actually able to enter. Now, this is obviously not a legal example, but people are able to enter data remotely. So again, you can do intake and not have to have it be on a paper form if you don't want to be, and have it all synced with the back-end database. And then similarly, people are using mobile devices a lot now, particularly tablets, to collect data from constituents. So at events, at trainings, at conferences, on the street even, so like canvassing on the street or going door to door looks a little bit different now because people can just grab the tablet and put in their responses to the surveys or the data collection. So that can be really interesting as well. Of course, you can also provide mobile devices in your programs. If you're trying to bridge a skills gap or you're trying to make sure people are comfortable with the process that they're going to have to do otherwise, you can certainly provide tablets for use. I'm not sure if that's something that's as popular or if as many folks are doing that in the legal space, although I'm sure you all can think of good examples. And then lastly, just a quick case study about Headway, which is a health and human services organization that did arm their case managers with smartphones to allow them to view and enter data from the field so that they didn't have that gap between having meetings with clients and being able to enter their case notes And they ended up with really good results, even just empowering their staff with smartphones so that they could schedule meetings and appointments, but also so that they could look things up for the clients or actually track data when they were on site. And this is another example of providing tablets or mobile devices directly to your clients or constituents to let them use them and play along. So that brings us to our question slide. I know that we've been pausing and asking for questions as we go, but we're truly out of slides now, so this is your last chance. Have any other questions come in, Brian? Are there any final comments or questions from Xander or Pat before we run out of time in the next 1 minute? Very interesting example, not a question but a comment. Thanks, David. That's awesome for sharing that. So receptionist at your orthopedist gets you an iPad instead of paper when you walk in the door. Pretty amazing. That's a great example. If others have examples like that or questions to share, go ahead and chat them in or feel free to unmute yourself. I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes. I don't know if Pat, Xander, or Brian can do that as well, but since I know many of you will have to drop, I just want to call your attention to the chat that Brian sent through with the evaluation or the survey for today's training. There's a Survey Monkey link in that chat window. So if you could please fill out that survey and let us know what you thought about today's training, that would be a huge help. And if you have to drop, I just want to say thank you for joining and for your time on today's webinar. I also want to thank Xander and Pat very much for sharing their experience